Greetings, one and all. This is me, G minus. You can call me G minus or Mark, whichever floats your boat. So I'm going to take a break from the white label collector series videos I just did. I personally think that that second one's kind of boring. I mean, thank you for a couple of people who've sent me messages saying they enjoyed it, but I'm like, I think I should jazz it up a bit. If I'm going to continue on those, I mean, I'll take your feedback, but I'm thinking the more interesting part of that last video, because I played it back, I'm like, oh, this is a snooze fest, was when I got the records out to illustrate that, you know, where the island recordings came from. So I think that what I might do if I continue with it is dig out, you know, maybe the next 10, pair them up with any of the records I've got, which would probably lead to more interesting stories and connections. So let me know what you think about that, or I can just keep going through them going, and there's one, and this one, and this one. Yeah. But anyway, so I chose to tell another story, and this is about Dave Houston, or also known as David Houston. He is best known for a big smash from 1966 on Epic Records called Almost Persuaded. He was a very good country singer. He had a fine voice, and he briefly flirted reluctantly with rock and roll, or rockabilly even. First record I know of by him is this one, which I'm going to take out the sleeve. I don't know if you can see it in the light. It looks black, but it's kind of this weird opaque blue, and it's called Blue Prelude. This came out on Imperial. It's one of the 8000 series, so I'm guessing 54, something like that, 55. I should do a show on Imperial 8000. I collect the Imperial 8000 series. But to the people who collect the kind of music that I like, he's best known for his RCA cuts. Sugar Sweet, first one I ever heard. Teenage Frankie and Johnny, One and Only, and my favorite one, I'll always have it on my mind. So I heard he was playing at the same venue as Frankie Ford, and I think I mentioned in the Frankie Ford one that I did that Frankie actually said, I think I said to Frankie, oh, we're going to see Dave Houston here like next week or whenever it was, and he was like, oh, Almost Persuaded was one of my favorite records. And I was informed by Ian Sadler, who did a fabulous magazine along with Al Turner and Phil Tricker called Roll Street Journal, that Dave was playing like 10 miles away from where I lived, and accompanying him was none other than Tillman Franks. If that's not a name you know, he was the bass player for so many people, but probably what you would be most interested in, he was Johnny Horton's bass player. So all the bass on, you know, a lot of those things you hear were Tillman. I guess, I don't know if Bob Moore played on some of those things in the studio, but he was, you know, he was Johnny's regular bass player, played for Jimmy and Johnny, he knew Hank Williams. He was a walking legend and treasure trove to talk to. And Ian said, look, we interviewed him and he had so much stuff to say when they played in London, the same, you know, same support, because he was playing bass for him. We're going to come down to see him there and do more of the interview. So I figured, oh, well, I could interview Dave Houston, being that he was a rockabilly singer that I knew. I'm trying to think what year this was. Oh, it'd be 1985, because it was the same as the Frankie Ford. And so we picked up Ian Sadler in my beat up old 50s Ford Zephyr station wagon, and we went to the club, and I'd prepared, I'd never interviewed anyone before, and I'd kind of thought, oh, well, you know, this is going to be easy. I wrote down my questions, you know. And we arrived there, and fairly quickly met Tillman. He greeted Ian, and I'm trying to think who Ian was with, actually. I don't think Ian was on his own. I'm not sure now. No, I think he was on his own. So they immediately got to talking, you know, before even the set went on, and I could hear Ian asking him questions and stuff. And then they played their set, and we got friendly with the band. The guitarist was a gentleman called Kent Gill, who is a Facebook friend of mine and is still around. I must link him to this video. A wonderful guy who we hung out with and talked about the differences. At that time, I'd never even been to the USA, so it was good to meet an American guitar picker. And Tillman regaled me and my friends with tales of Jimmy and Johnny getting into fights over pinball games, Hank Williams playing his mother's piano at their house. I mean, it was amazing. Our jaws were dropping because we were mentioning to him people that we thought we only knew about. You know, we were kind of, you know, I was like, you ever heard of Gino Quinn or Rambling Jimmy Dolan? And he would tell me stories about them. So it was incredible. But the time was coming for me to interview Mr. Dave Houston. Now, he was in a movie called Carnival Rock, a rock and roll movie. An absolutely awful, a god awful movie. It's dreary. It's like someone's made a kind of a suicidal, depressing movie set around a carnival. And every once in a while, there was just in between scenes, oh, and here's a band practicing, you know. So the juxtaposition is, though, that probably the best examples of rockabilly clips in the 50s exist in that movie. And every one of them is shot great and is legendary. Especially because, you know, one of my biggest idols, Bob Luman, is captured in that movie. You can see him do All Night Long and This Is the Night. And it is absolutely perfection. Only Elvis 56 kind of clips on TV are as good as that. And maybe the clips in Rock Baby Rocket. But not even those match your perfect rockabilly scenario. You've got James Burton on guitar. You know, you've got... oh gosh, I've just gone blank. James Kirkland on bass. Forget the drummer, but you know, you got Ricky Nelson. Well, that was the band that Ricky Nelson took from Bob Luman from that movie, and Dave Houston is in that movie with the same band, and he is the epitome of what you would want from a rockabilly singer. He looks amazing, handsome, like Elvis. Perfect hair, like, you know, perfect kind of your kind of Elvis 56 hair, dressed immaculately, moves great, like dynamite. And I came to learn when I spoke to Dave Houston that he was in that movie because they offered it to Elvis, and Elvis was like, no thanks. And I think because Houston was on the same label, maybe Elvis knew him. Elvis said, you know, how about Dave Houston? Or he said to Dave Houston, maybe, hey, why don't you go down on audition? But that was how that happened. But when it came time to interview him, I was armed with, like, my records. I think I had, like, one record. I had Sugar Sweet, and I had a sleeve for him to sign. And I had a film still from Carnival Rock, which was an amazing shot of him on stage with the guitar, looking as cool as I described. And I sit down, and the first thing before the interview, like, we're all sat there, everyone's been real friendly. He comes out, he was about as energetic and friendly as my encounters with Al Ferrier and Robert Gordon. He did not want to be in this tiny town talking to a 20, what would I have been? 19-year-old kid who's really just a fan who wants an autograph and thinks he can do an interview. And so he kind of comes out and he sits himself in a chair and he's like, and I'm like, oh, it's nice to meet you. Yeah. And I pull out the Carnival Rock picture and I'm like, you know, I'm like, hey, I bought this. And he's like, what the hell's that? I said, oh, that's you in Carnival Rock. I never did see that movie. And I'm like, oh crap. And my brain all of a sudden is gone. I have no questions. Apart from, okay. No, then he says, whoever's got the questions, start asking them. And I'm like, oh. And I'm like nervous. What year were you? 1930, whatever, you know. And he was giving me nothing except for evils, and I was dying inside. I was just like, I taped it. I've still got the tape somewhere, but I did think to ask him. There'd been a constant search at that time for Joe Clay, and because he was on Victor or Vic, which was it was one of those labels that RCA it was a subsidiary where they put the undesirables or the untrusted, you know, for a tryout. And he was on Vic. And at that time, Joe Clay hadn't been found. It turned out he was driving a school bus in Louisiana, but he hadn't been found at that point. So everybody was trying to find Joe Clay. So I say to David Houston, I'm like, so you ever heard of a guy called Joe Clay? And so I still got the tape somewhere, and it was exactly like this. Joe Clay? Joe Clay? I said, I don't think he was anyone particularly. He must have been someone if he was on Victor. He knew someone. Okay. Hey, Tillman, you ever hear of Joe? And it turned out Ian had already asked him that question, so that was a dead end. So I did. He reluctantly signed a sleeve. It was even the wrong period sleeve to go on my records. I asked him about Sugar Sweet. He said, "Well, it was an old blues song. Originally went, I wanna tell about my baby, speak of her with pride." As that was really all I got from him. I got nothing else from him. But I did get a photograph with Tillman Franks, which myself with Tillman's bass, Tillman Franks, and that is Steve Palfrey, who I went with, who I haven't mentioned him. No, I was going to mention him on something else. So there we are. And it wasn't the funnest of meetings, really, but I'll tell you something.